Welcome to the D-Shift podcast, where we provide inspiration, motivation, and education to help you transition from the challenges of divorce to discover the freedom and ability to live life on your own terms. Are you ready? Let's get this shift started. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the D-Shift podcast. And I am so happy to be able to have a repeat guest on the show, Amber Hollingsworth. She talked to us earlier all about addiction awareness as you're going through divorce if you are dealing with somebody who has an addiction problem. And today we're going to talk about maybe some of the signs that we need to be aware of that, or do we have an addiction? Do we not have an addiction to whatever the substance may be? And are we overthinking things and creating problems, or are we simply acknowledging something that's really happening in our lives? So Amber is a master addiction counselor. She's founder of Hope for Families Recovery Center, and she's the creator of the podcast, of the YouTube, well, it's a YouTube channel and podcast, right? Mm-hmm. Put the Shovel Down. Amber works with families recovering and navigating through addiction and recovery. And her focus is really on really practical strategies. And I really appreciated our last conversation. So welcome back, Amber.
Thanks for having me back. It's so good to be twice. I feel honored.
Well, you have such an important message. And it's also something we were just chatting a little bit before we got started today. I'm seeing more and more that people are, I'm not going to say using alcohol to get through the divorce, but it's more of a social thing now, especially with women. It's wine, mm-hmm. and not like it hasn't been in the past, but it just seems to be, I'm hearing about it a lot more. So, and some of my clients do ask me, like, legitimately, well, I'm having a few glasses of wine, but I'm still getting up and going to work. So, hey, do I have a problem or not have a problem? So this is just an informational, educational session. Right. Before we get into all of that, though, Amber, can you tell people, if they didn't catch your first one, tell us a little bit about you and why this is your area of focus?
Okay. Well, I've been helping people and families struggling with addiction on both sides, whether it's like the person or the person's family, for like 20 years now. More than that, actually. Makes me feel old to say. I come from an addicted family. I sort of got in the field kind of by accident, but sometimes you just land exactly where you need to be. Yeah. So I'm here. I've been doing this a long time, and my approach to it isn't like the traditional approach, the whole like hit bottom, tough love thing. Especially because a lot of people I see are really pretty highly functional people, and that just really doesn't fit for them, all those traditional ways of thinking.
And thank you for mentioning that, because we all have this picture of a person that needs to be, go to a recovery center as somebody who is maybe out on the streets because they've, stolen everything from their family and blown through all their friendships and they have no place to go. Or we see them as people that are, in and out of the hospital with all these medical issues and everything. But that's not the case for people, at least early on in alcoholism, is it?
That's right. And I love what you said. You said early on. And that's the way I like to think of it. Because a lot of people think, well, you're an alcoholic or you're not an alcoholic. And that's not really the way it works. It's really on a continuum. And unfortunately, most people don't recognize that they're having a problem until they're like having some of those like really late stage symptoms, like having to drink every day, or having to drink in the morning, or getting the shakes really bad if you're not drinking, or you've lost everything. And yes, of course, those are symptoms of having an alcohol problem, but those are like end stage symptoms. I'm like, let's catch this thing way before we get there, because it's a lot easier to fix if you catch it earlier. That's my goal, is to help people catch it and address it before it messes things up for them.
Yeah. And, it's funny because I've worked with a lot of people, and I'm a drinker. I won't, but I have, and especially when I was a lot younger, it was kind of the thing to do. You went out, you had a bunch of beers, and that was kind of what we did. And now looking back, I think there was obviously a time when I was drinking more and more frequently than I should have been. I think I was lucky because I don't think I became addicted, in that it was relatively easy for me to just say, whoa, got to back off this a little bit. But that
Right.
doesn't always happen to people. And sometimes it
Right.
can be that creeping up. Can you talk a little bit to that issue? And I know we were talking about why sometimes stressors like divorce and things can make this a little bit more significant, something to focus on.
That's it exactly. It's when you start using it as a coping skill. Because when you start using, people use the term self-medicating, and I think there's some validity to it. Like you're using it to cope with stress, or you're using it because you have this problem that you don't want to deal with, or you don't know how to deal with it. So you're trying to cram it down, or feelings you're trying to push away. And then you start using that to cope with all those things. Well, the problem is whatever that problem is, you're not dealing with that stress that you're not solving doesn't go away. So you just need it all the time, and then you're using it more frequently. And now it becomes not just something I'm doing socially or something I enjoy every now and then, but something I start to kind of need. And now we're kind of sliding into new territory.
Well, and not only, I think, like you feel like you need to have a drink when you're out socially. You feel like, oh, if I don't drink, everybody's going to think there's something wrong with me, or they're going to make fun of me or whatever. So you drink, and then you feel bad because you drank. Maybe you said something to somebody you would never normally say, or maybe you did something that's embarrassing. And then you have to deal with kind of that side of the coin as well. And I think that you feel guilty, and then that makes you feel worse. So you drink again, and it just kind of becomes a cycle.
Oh, I call it the shame cycle, right? It's like I do something I really regret. I feel terrible about it. And then I feel so terrible about it, I need a drink to not feel terrible about it. Yeah. And the thing you said about, you're out with friends and everyone's having a drink, I don't think it's super abnormal to think, well, I'm just going to have a drink. Everyone's having a drink. So that thought by itself doesn't necessarily hit my radar as a flag. But if you're thinking this thought, if you're thinking, okay, they've had two, I really want to order another one, but I'm going to wait till she orders another one. You're counting everybody's drinks, and you're worried about managing your amount of drinking, about how much you're drinking, how much they're seeing you drink, not from a, okay, they're having a drink, I'll have a drink, but you're trying to control it and drink less, or you're trying to manage it. That is a bigger indicator. That's one that kind of gets on my radar, is like, okay, like let's pay attention to that.
Right. I have had a client in the past who was very, had a lot of anxiety around being out in social events. So they would have a few drinks to get ready to go out and have a drink with friends. And I think that, that's where that idea of self-medicating comes in. And maybe it sounds good on paper, but it's not really productive in reality, right?
Yeah. And that sort of self-medicating for social anxiety is really common. And it's definitely a catch-22 because it does reduce your anxiety, allows you to kind of, let your inhibitions down and be more comfortable. The problem is it's hard to control how much inhibitions come down. You don't want your whole filter to get gone.
Right.
And that's the whole problem with alcohol, especially if like let's say you're having a few drinks before so that you can get in the situation, then you're having some drinks there. And now all of a sudden, you feel less anxious, but maybe you don't have enough anxiety, like you don't have any filter, and then you end up feeling embarrassed or regretful about something you said, and then that makes your social anxiety worse, and then we just get in a sort of a bad feedback loop.
Yeah. So Amber, let's take a look at like the whole question of, am I really struggling with an addiction, or am I overthinking it because maybe, maybe my family doesn't believe in alcohol use or whatever? Like, how do you know where the line is?
A better measure of whether or not you're having an alcohol problem is more about how much you think about it, more important than how much you're doing it. So when you're setting a lot of like rules for yourself, or you're setting these limits and then you're breaking these limits, and then you're upset with yourself, and then you're setting more limits, and now all of a sudden you got all these formulas that you can drink this much on these days, but you can drink this kind of alcohol content but not that kind, and it gets real complicated. We're in trouble territory, because it means you're having to use a lot of mental energy thinking about it, wanting it, planning it, doing it, trying not to do it too much. And then maybe you feel a little embarrassed about your drinking, so you're hiding some of the evidence, or maybe your spouse is on your case and you're like trying to hide the bottles away in the bottom of the trash or get them out of the recycle. When it's taken a lot of energy and effort, even maybe you're not drinking like a crazy amount, but it's taken a lot of like mental resources. That's something that you need to pay attention to.
When you said that, I for years have gone to a yoga studio, and I've tried a whole bunch of different ones. And I happened to be traveling one time, and it was a big center, stopped in at the yoga studio and got to people in yoga studios are very chatty. Usually they just chat. And we were talking about this, and this one lady said, something about having a glass of wine. And she goes, I've got this strategy. Like she lived in a large center, and there was lots of liquor stores around her and grocery stores that sold wine and beer. And she had a schedule, a 2-week schedule, so that it didn't look like she was drinking that much, because she had a different place she went.
Marty, like that. And that's not uncommon. Like a lot of people that see me, because they go to the same place and maybe they get the same thing, and then the cashier's like, "Oh, you're here, Amber. I got it up here for you already." And in the cashier's mind, they're, just a good customer, but it feels embarrassing,
right.
when that starts to happen. So then you go to the grocery store on Tuesdays, and then you go to the ABC store on Thursdays, and
right.
because that's a really good example of like, now you have all these systems and this consciousness about what other people are seeing you do. You see how complicated that is?
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that complicated.
Yes. And I even know a lady that, anyhow, doesn't matter how I know her, but she switched from bottled wine to boxed wine because she was so embarrassed with the recycling stuff. So, the boxed wine, she could just throw the bag out, flatten the cardboard, and nobody knew it was wine. Whereas bottles rattle around and make a lot of noise and take up a lot of space.
That's right. See how it's so much energy? Or like another common one is people will try to control it by getting the mini bottles, because they're easier to, number one, hide, like to use. They're easier to get rid of and hide. And in some situations, people are using it as a way to control or count how much they're drinking, because they probably went from bottles to boxes for that reason. And then they're like, wow, when I get these boxes, I'm over drinking too much. Now I'm going to get the mini bottles, because then I can know for sure I'm having this many standard drinks. And then you start finding yourself, you go to the store, you're like, I'm not going to have more than 3, and I'm just going to only buy 3. And you have this promise, and then you get those 3, you go home, you drink it, and then guess what happens? You end up driving back.
Yeah.
To
and
get
that's
more.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you have these complicated systems in place, maybe it's not so much that you drink every day, but it's more that you have trouble like controlling how much you drink once you start.
Right.
So it's sort of like when I open the gate, it's hard to, like predict it or get the gate back closed. Those are some of the earlier signs when you can kind of recognize, okay, I may not be, maybe I don't need to go to detox, but this is going somewhere I don't want it to go.
Okay. So this quite often leads to, and again, I do get clients who talk to me about this, and I typically refer them out, because I am by no means an expert on any of this, and I shouldn't be advising people on any of this. And that's why I'm saying this is strictly for educational purposes. Let's say you realize that you have a drinking problem now, or you're drinking with one of these patterns we've talked about. Does that mean that you have to like cold turkey never drink again for your life? Is that the only solution? I know that's, there's a particular organization that's their thing, is you can never touch a drop again. Is that true? Is that what's the reality for that?
It can be true. And most people, the examples we were just talking about all the formulas and the ways people are trying to control it. If you've done all that and it hasn't worked, that's a really good indicator that the managing it or moderating it is just not working for you. And even if it is kind of working, it's so hard. It shouldn't be that complicated. And you may end up feeling like, okay, it's just not even worth it. Like 2 glasses of wine is not worth all of this, me having to think about it and be in control of it and worry about what other people are, it's like, gosh, it either doesn't work, the efforts fail, or it does work, but it's so freaking hard, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
When you've had all of that, And it's so scary because people are like, well, I don't want to give it up forever. But it's actually a lot easier. Drinking none is way easier than drinking a little. And because what happens when you drink none is eventually you stop caring about it. You don't miss it. You don't crave it. You actually feel a lot better. Your brain chemicals heal.
Yeah. No
When
more
you drink just
hangovers.
a little bit, you're constantly craving it. You know, it's like
Yeah.
eating one potato chip or something. You know, it's like, is it really worth it? Like, you're constantly craving it. Your brain chemicals won't stabilize, so you feel more anxious, more irritable. Your sleep isn't good, and if you are moderating, you're not really even drinking enough to feel anything. So that's what I mean when I say like a lot of
Yeah.
people just find it's just not even worth it. Like it's just easier to not have it.
Yeah, yeah. That was one thing I was going to mention. I read a couple of articles talking about a lot of people that have like a nightcap or a couple of glasses of wine in the evening just to unwind, that their quality of sleep decreases astronomically. So you're almost getting no value, no regenerative
Right.
impact from your sleep. And prolonged, that's going to overall have a really negative impact on everything for
Oh
all of your
yeah.
body functions. Yeah.
Everything. Yeah. Yeah. Because what happens is when you're sort of going to sleep from drinking, which, you know, like passing out really, you don't get into stage 4 sleep, which is that rapid eye movement. It's like dream sleep. And your dream sleep is where your tank gets filled back up, your willpower tank, your resiliency. And so yeah, you may be there are hours when you're not awake, right? But you're not getting like exactly what you said, you're not getting the restorative sleep. So and then the other thing that happens, and this is another big signal that you could be having trouble, is a lot of times people drink and it's like, no, I don't have a sleep problem. They fall asleep easy, but they're drinking to fall asleep, but they don't stay asleep. So what happens is they drink or maybe even take a sleeping pill on top of it or something, and then they fall asleep okay, but their body's still filtering out the alcohol as they're sleeping. And so once the alcohol filters out, they wake up at some ungodly time in the morning. Their head is going 100 miles an hour in a not good way. They feel anxious, and it can get to the point you even almost feel sort of like panicky because you're having this rebound effect. So it
Okay.
has a major impact on your sleep. So you may think, well, I'm going to sleep okay, but am I getting good sleep?
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So and we don't have much time left. I cannot believe how fast these conversations go. It's like time speeds up when we're on these.
I
Um,
know. Yeah.
let's say somebody's listening
Mm-hmm.
and they are a professional. All of the women I work with are very high achieving, very professional, very
Yeah.
committed to their families and their future and their careers and moving forward. Let's say they're going, well, yeah, I sometimes, or I do some of these things that Amber's been mentioning. what what can people do, like, to make small changes or not be afraid that somehow like everything has to screech on hold and they have to go to an inpatient detox and go through months and months and months of this? Because I think there is still a lot of a stigma about some, for especially in some business places, to get that
Yeah.
kind of support and help that people really need. So what should people do, Amber?
Okay. So the first thing is to sort of figure out what you need. Like, do you really need to go to inpatient? If you've tried to stop and you can't get past like day 2 or 3, sometimes that's an indicator that maybe you need some help with the withdrawal and detox. And maybe you don't even see it. You're not like, I'm not going into DTs, but it's like you stop, but on day 3, you always cave back. Day 2 and 3 is sort of the height of the uncomfortableness of withdrawal. So sometimes it's just a matter of you can talk to your doctor and they can help you, but you got to be honest with them. You got to say what's going on. If it's more severe than that, it could mean that you need detox help, like medical, because it's actually stopping alcohol cold turkey when you're really dependent on it is one of the more dangerous things to do, like more dangerous than heroin, which I
Yeah.
know sounds crazy, but it's true. Um, but let's say it's that bad and you really need that, but you're an executive or something. They could be a little expensive, but they do have like executive detox programs where they'll come to your house and do it for you privately. There are options, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
But let's say you don't need that. Let's say you're like, oh, I don't have to drink. I can stop, right? It's just that when I do drink, I drink too much. If you've already tried the cutting it back and the moderation thing, the next thing to do is maybe try a good like 30 days without it, like a dry January or sober October, something like that. The reason to do that is because the first couple of weeks when you stop, you feel worse. And so when you think about being sober, you're thinking about what those days feel like. And I'm like, but that's not a good measure. You're not to the good part yet. So if you're going to, stop for at least 30 days so you can get a good feel for what it's like on this side of the fence versus that side of the fence, right? Because you're probably going to find that you feel a lot better. You have more energy. You have more motivation. Life is simpler. And you might just decide, hey, it's actually way better over here. I think I'll stay, But even if you don't, at least you'll have a good measure for what it's like to be sober versus not. Those first few days don't count. Because, if you quit sugar, you're going to be detoxing for a week and you're going to feel worse, right? So those don't count for what it's like. You got to get past that, over that hump, and then you have at least a good measure. So that's a good place to start if you're not sure. Let me see if I can do like a 30-day.
Okay.
If I can't do it, if I can't get past 2 or 3, then maybe I need some help to do it.
Okay. Are there any specific things that you would encourage people to do, maybe to kind of fill up that, like, I'm not wording this very well. Like, I know if you're trying to quit snacking at night, they recommend you do something like knitting or puzzles, or even if it's play a game on your phone, something to keep your mind and your hands busy, especially if you want to quit smoking. They talk about that all the time for smoking cessation.
You're retraining a habit, right?
Yeah.
Because for a lot of people, drinking is tied to a time of day, like after work or a dinner, or maybe you don't drink during the week, but it's on the weekends. And so there are certain times or situations where obviously the habit kicks in, the craving kicks in, and you want to plan for that. Like, and what you want to do is just anything to get out of your routine. So if you normally, you go home and you binge your favorite Netflix show and you drink, 6 glasses of wine, go home and do something else, or watch a different show, or sit on a different chair or couch. Don't put on your same yoga pants situation. Like, literally just change your routine up, because a big piece of this is habit, right? And if we just do the same little things, we just find ourselves back doing it out of automatic habit.
Yeah. I think that's really good advice. And the other thing is, if your friends don't support you, they're not your friends. They're your drinking buddies. And maybe they need to go down the road, at least until you're comfortable in saying, no, I'll just have a sparkling water with my supper, or whatever you might be doing.
If your friends are not gung-ho about it, it means that it makes them a little uncomfortable. Okay. Because this is the way I explain it. It's like, if I go out to eat with my husband and then I order a cheeseburger and he orders a salad, I'm kind of ticked. I'm like, what? You can't do that. I'm like, madam, which I know isn't right? But it's kind of like that, right? It's not about him. It's about me feeling, now I feel uncomfortable, right? So sometimes it's a matter of, it makes them feel uncomfortable, and that can be kind of awkward. And it can mean that they have their own thing going on. So I wouldn't take it so personally.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, what you want to do, honestly, is if you're trying to stop, you want to kind of like avoid those situations for a little while. You're not going to avoid it forever. And then if you're still uncomfortable and you don't want to have the whole conversation, order something that looks like a drink.
Yeah.
Just have a drink, a glass in your hand that looks like a drink. And then when they say, hey, do you want a drink? Be like, no, I already got it. I'm good. And then you don't even have to have the conversation.
Well, and I've done a lot of different things where, and I prefer not to drink if I'm out. So I'll usually have, like a sparkling water or whatever. And one of the things that's interesting is most restaurants, even most bars now, although I haven't been to a bar in a long time, they have like mocktails, or they have, non-alcoholic drinks. And some of them are amazing, and they're delicious. They're great. You wouldn't even know that don't feel like you're missing out on anything.
Yeah. I've got some clients that live out of the country. Like, I've got a client in Sweden and some in England and stuff like that. And they say it's sort of trendy, the non-alcoholics, like it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a thing. I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. So you can always order that because it looks like a drink. If you're real worried, you can kind of go up to the waiter, bartender, and say, hey, I'm not drinking tonight. Just keep my glass full. And then they're not asking you in front of everyone else. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good idea too. Yeah.
There's different ways to handle it. If it's somebody that you see regularly that this is going to come up with all the time, you may want to tell them.
Right.
But if this is just like a work function and you see these people, but not all the time, you don't want to explain to everybody, just do what you need to do.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. It's interesting as adults how we still have that. Well, maybe the kids won't like me. If I don't.
Peer pressure is a thing. Adults are probably more prone than kids. I don't know how we say it's a kid thing. It's
it was funny. I went on a couple of cruises last year, and I just said at the table or whatever, they always come around and ask if you want anything to drink, and I just say no, I want an iced tea or whatever, and I just told people I'm not drinking this cruise. And, everybody was like, oh, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. There's a couple other people that did it. And not that they weren't going to do it anyhow. But I think it's more accepted. And we just have to say it. If I want a glass of wine, I'm going to have one. But we don't have to have it just because somebody else is telling us. So, Amber, this has been phenomenal. I mean, honestly, we could chat for this for a long time. I think I think this is an important topic, though, because like I said, stressors like divorce and like you have said, can be sort of that can add extra pressure. People can be looking for ways to cope with some of the stress and things they're dealing with.
Oh, yeah.
So
this thing likes to hit you when you're down, and a divorce is a perfect time for this to try to come and get you.
Yes, absolutely. So, Amber, out of all the things you shared with us today, what do you think is the takeaway you want anybody listening to this today to remember?
I really want people to understand that having an alcohol problem is on a continuum, and it doesn't have to look any certain way. If you don't like what it's doing in your life, that's enough. You don't have to try to figure out, am I an alcoholic or not? You don't have to make it that complicated. You have to ask, does this serve me the way I want it to serve me? You can keep it simple.
Great. Thank you so much for that. I think that's a really positive way to look at it too. Now, Amber, you have offered everybody a gift, which is really amazing. It is understanding boundaries. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. And boundaries are for the boundary stuff is really good for anyone, whether you alcohol or not, or you have a partner with alcohol, especially for women. I think, boundaries are just really hard.
Yeah.
So I think you have the link. You can go get it. Yes. It's totally free. You can download it. There's tons of other resources on my website. Like if you're really questioning, do I have an alcohol problem? You can download the criteria. Like you can look at the official ones if you really want to. There are lots of things there.
Great. And it's a great website. I took a look at it last time you were on. And so that is what the last question I'm going to ask you is if people do want to go to your website, find out more about what you do, or maybe reach out and work with you, what's the best way to do that?
I honestly think the best place to find me to begin with is on YouTube because there's so many free resources there. I mean, there's just tons of videos, no matter what side of this you're on. Maybe you have a brother or sister or whatever. It's all there. And the channel is called Put the Shovel Down, which I know might be strange or like, why is that the name? And it basically means, it's an old recovery saying that means you hit your bottom when you put your shovel down, as in you don't have to keep digging. You don't have to lose everything. You can decide, I'm done with this. So you find me on YouTube. I do have a website, but I say start with YouTube.
Okay. And I will make sure the link for your YouTube channel gets in those show notes as well. So Amber, thanks for being here and sharing this information because this is a topic that doesn't get discussed a lot as it relates to divorce. And I really appreciate you sharing this with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And thank you everyone for listening in to this episode of The D Shift. And don't forget to tune in for the next one. Thanks for listening and supporting the D Shift podcast. If you would like to attend live trainings by our amazing guests and have a chance to ask questions and get answers from our experts, join the D Shift crew. For more details and to sign up, head on over to www.divorcecoachforwomen and click on the podcast page.